G'day everyone, I am the man called Kemosabe. I am the man with a plan from the land down under, and this is my review of ENGLEWOOD, written by Micah Curtis with art by Brian Martinez and colours by Armand Strange. Letters are by the hardest working letterer in Comicsgate, Eric Weathers, and the book is edited by the Hat Man, Alex Baldwin. As usual, I'll review the cover, the content of the book, then talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of this comic. The cover is a great concept. I'm reminded of one of the gameplay trailers for Days Gone, where Deacon is on top of a building, swarms of zombies are clambering up towards him and he has nowhere to go. In the West at least, we read left to right, and so our eye follows the action up the ladder towards the main character. The crowd is like a who's who of organised crime: biker gangs, street gangs, ninjas, yakuza, neo-Nazi skinheads, the mafia among others, showing us that the Saint of Englewood will likely come into conflict with all of these factions during the upcoming stories, and even if he doesn't, he is at least willing to fight all comers. This is definitely the sort of cover I would see at the local comic store and feel compelled to know more. This hectic, overactive cover would make me want to flip through the book and consider it for purchase. I've spoken at length about the importance of a good cover. It needs to showcase the character, something about the character, or some event or trend in the book itself. This cover depicts the main character beset by dozens of enemies and standing his ground, so it speaks to his character and the sort of action he takes when faced with adversity. He's a man of action. In terms of colour theory, brown is close to purple in many ways, and this cover is overwhelmingly brown and purple. With the spotlights at the base of the walkway of the billboard washing out many of the colours, and so many details packed into the page, it all kind of blends together in a greyish mass. I'd rather have seen some more high contrast colours, or maybe a colour filter over the enemies to unite them against the similar colours in the background. Even removing the lights, or maybe changing them to a yellowish hue rather than the white, would help the elements pop a little more. It's not a bad cover, just one where the colours are too similar, and it diminishes the impact it could otherwise have. The story starts with a group of gangbangers about to breach a door and face the Saint of Englewood. They recount what they have heard about him. They say he's bulletproof, he breaks his enemies, but he doesn't kill them. The gang members realise their only chance to win is to rush their enemy. They push through the door and are met with this. It's a pretty good splash page. We're treated to a nice 9-panel page of fighting, with the Saint handily defeating the gang members that didn't flee. We learn that the Saint has an Oracle or Overwatch type character called Echo that supports him, and they use drones to gather intel on situations. This is becoming more common in comics and media lately. I incorporated it into one of my stories after seeing how effective it was in Ghost Recon Wildlands. I saw it used extensively in the Telltale Batman game, and I expect to see it used more often now that drones are cheaper, more reliable, and easier to use than ever. Defeating the gangbangers draws out their boss, and the next 3 pages are a knockdown, drag-out fight. The Saint wins, but the fight isn't so one-sided this time. The Saint makes his way out of the building and meets up with Echo. Echo mentions that their friends on the police force have warned them that patrol cars are on the way. The Saint climbs into the van and they drive away. The Saint catches his breath and tells us a little about who he is and why he does what he does. The second half of the book is a flashback, catching us up on how the character got into this situation. It takes the form of a radio interview where we learn the Saint is actually Elijah Wallace, a former heavyweight MMA champion disgraced after a painkiller addiction forced him to relinquish his title. He returns home, opens a community gym and begins building a new life. Local gangbangers take exception to him helping street kids and challenge him to a fight. Elijah cripples the criminal in a fair fight. The criminal soon returns with a gun and performs a drive-by shooting, killing all of Elijah's students. The book ends with Elijah kneeling in the blood of the innocent victims. There's a lot to like with this book. I'm glad I backed it and I enjoyed reading it. The fights are good, they're long. I hate fights that are too short or glossed over in a panel or two. I like the use of drones, the fact that the Saint doesn't kill and he works with elements within the police department. The scenes of Elijah working with the community, supporting fathers with their sons, helping ex-prisoners get a second chance were truly touching. Now that I'm a father to a son, scenes like this really get to me. I'll admit I choked up a little reading them. I used to think it was preachy and sanctimonious and people would tell others that they couldn't understand what it's like to have kids until they themselves have kids. But now I'm on the other side of the fence, I sing the same song. Before I had kids, I had no idea what I was talking about. Seeing fathers making meaningful connections with their sons and seeing Elijah supporting it selflessly really hit home with me. It's some nice writing by Micah Curtis. It's great seeing a character take responsibility for his mistakes. Elijah straight up owns what he did and moves forward, trying to do better, trying to be a better man. After his fall from grace, he returns to his community and invests in the people, trying to make a real difference. It's a little heavy-handed, but it works. By this point, Elijah is already a hero. The costume is just a formality. I mentioned the unusual colouring choices on the cover, and similar ones pop up all through the book. There's a lot of instances of the colourist using textures to compensate for a lack of detail being drawn in. The textures here are too heavy, they're not natural enough. He's using the right sort of textures, heavy old cheap gritty paint and cracked concrete, but it looks like he's just used an overlay or multiply layer. It's too jarring a visual with the cartoony art style, and if the texture isn't aligned properly, it throws off your perspective. I don't think the colouring style complements the art at all, actually. That's not to say this colouring style wouldn't work with another artist's work, but the bold, colourful style might be too detailed for this cartoony art. I think this art would benefit from a flatter colouring style. There are some great instances of colouring. These blends in this splash page are brilliant. Then you get panels like this where the colourist is doing half the work of the artist. The walls, the leaves, the trunk of the tree, the marble, the glass, it's all textures. A lot of the backgrounds suffer from the same issue, more texture than detail. This doesn't look professional. As good as some of the writing is, some of it is stiff and on the nose. The gangbangers lampshade the fact that they aren't carrying guns. This kind of thing always sticks out to me, like the writer knows there is a flaw in the narrative, and rather than address it logically, they kind of make excuses for why they don't. They wax lyrical about what they've heard about the Saint of Englewood, but I feel the dialogue could have been massaged a little more to make it feel more natural. This is maybe something the editor could have mentioned. I'm not a fan of the long backstory. The story itself is fine, it's good even, particularly the parts I mentioned before. So many new crowdfunded books do this. I feel like I recite this same spiel every other video. Show don't tell is a tried and true storytelling tenet. Hint at the reasons the Saint is motivated to fight. Hint at the personal demons that caused him to be expelled from the MMA leagues. Hint at the great tragedy that caused him to suit up in the first place. Now I know what happened, there's nothing left to the imagination. Some things are better left unsaid, or at least postponed to a much later date. The art in the book is good, but it's inconsistent. Some panels and pages are great, and some fall a bit short. It's tough when you're on a budget. We're all just guys paying for comic art page by page when we have some spare money. None of us have Marvel's deep pockets. How do you ask your artist to rework a panel or a page? When you can't do the job yourself, do you have the right to ask for multiple redraws? How much leeway does your page rate allow you as the client? And is it churlish to demand perfection when you can't do better? I don't know. I remember Zach saying it took him a while before he could ask his artist to redraw elements. I know the feeling. I hate asking my artist to change something. I try to be as diligent as possible to make sure I don't forget some detail, forcing him to waste time redrawing something he could have got right the first time if I had just paid more attention. The pages of Elijah reliving his past are really solid. They have the best art and the best colouring. Some of the stuff on either side of these scenes is shakier. Panels like this, where all the background is made up of textures, looks jarring. It makes it apparent where the artist didn't draw backgrounds. Was this a time issue? The book was several months late. When under immense pressure people say something's got to give. Were backgrounds the give in this book? If a second book is forthcoming, it will be interesting to see what delays, if any, are experienced and what that means for the artwork itself. I think this character has potential, a lot of potential. I'd love to co-write a crossover with one of my street-level characters with the Saint. He looks very, very cool. His design is modern, sleek, realistic, but still heroic. Some modern designs go so far into utilitarian that they forego the heroic. I wish Micah had left a flashback for another issue though, or maybe spliced a scene of the flashback per issue for the next 6 issues, rather than dump it all on us all at once. Half the book is made up of the flashback. I'd rather learn more about how the Saint and Echo operate together. I'd like to see what gadgets he uses, what the weapons he uses are, where he gets his gear, his relationship with the sympathetic members of the police force. Most characters become heroes because of some great driving tragedy. If you see a character in a colourful costume fighting bad guys, I can suppose that he is motivated by tragedy. I don't need to see the whole motivating event as it happened. I'd rather have more action, more of the now. The character's drive, his desire to punish bad men and make a difference to clean up the city is apparent. I'd rather the character's motivating trauma be postponed to later. Give me 6 issues of action, of street fights, cool gadgets. Get me to really deeply care about the character before you infodump 13 pages of backstory on me. Build up the guilt he feels, the drive, his shortcomings and personal demons, and the conflict it brings up as he fights crime. Then, when we need to know what went down, show us why he does what he does. I hope some of Elijah's students, the ones who didn't die, feature in the future as sidekicks, allies, or even enemies. The same goes for his former opponents. I could well see the bad guys hiring another MMA fighter to tangle with the Saint as he clearly favours hand-to-hand combat. I get a real Black Lightning vibe from this book, which is good. I like the first season of Black Lightning. Despite all the powers and drama and big corporate and government conspiracies, it also touched on real issues within the African American community. Christopher Priest has talked extensively about the fact that for a long time he was only asked to write black characters. He thought that was a flawed mentality, that a good writer should be able to write any race or belief or orientation. In a cartoony way, this book touches on the issues of organised crime and violence in Chicago. I think it's brave of Micah in today's climate, in the face of the cancel culture crew, to want to touch on these issues in his book. Englewood is a book with potential. Now that the flashbacks are hopefully out of the way, I look forward to learning more about how the Saint operates and reading about his war on crime in Chicago. Micah has another book coming to Indiegogo soon, 4 Nights, 3 Days, about Templar Nights, and he's also mentioned a third project in the works in collaboration with Bob Stone, who is an amazing artist with a realistic style reminiscent of Brian Hitch. It makes me wonder what's the plan for the next Englewood issue. Is it already in the works? Is it coming this year or in 2021 or 2022? If there's no issue 2 anytime soon, what was the point of issue 1? If you're not building on a franchise, if you're diversifying, are you missing out? Are you wasting energy building up multiple titles to a middling success when you could prop up one title to dizzying heights? Authors who sell primarily in the ebook market often advise against diversifying. Once you've got a successful book on your hands, they suggest you flog that horse for all it's worth, serialising it until you run out of ideas until it is no longer profitable. By diversifying, you are spreading your reader's interest over too many areas. There's arguments for and against this kind of thinking. If Chuck Dixon only wrote time travel stories, he would have missed out on profits from his excellent Leave on Cade series. But I'm not interested in his time travel stories. I only want the Cade books, more of them, as often as he's able to write them. I feel like maybe the same thing will happen here. Micah's created a solid character and begun building a fan base of this world. Now he's switching gears to a supernatural Templar story, then again to this mystery third project with Bob Stone, when he should be working on the second issue of Englewood to build momentum, customer loyalty and engagement, or he should at least adopt Zach's staggered release model across his franchises. The biggest indicator of a book's success in this crowdfunding game is customer retention and growth from project to project. Will Micah have as many or even more backers on 3 Days, 4 Nights? Is the fan base for an ex-MMA champion Street Fighter level vigilante in modern times the same group of people who will back a book about Templars in medieval times fighting a supernatural menace? I imagine there's some crossover, but it will be interesting to see if Englewood inspires backers to follow Micah to his next project, or if not, if they're waiting for the next issue of Englewood, how long will they wait before their enthusiasm wanes? How long can Micah afford to make them wait?